I just finished the first 2 chapters of Life is Strange Double Exposure over the weekend, and while it's far from perfect, I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen so far. I know that some fans are really upset with how they handled Max and Chloe's breakup, and I totally understand that. It's not great. But as a longtime fan of BioWare games who thought that the old god baby was going to be the biggest thing to ever happen to Thetis, the way Deck 9 handled the end of Pricefield is about what I expected. Aside from their handling of this fan-favorite relationship, the first 2 chapters of Double Exposure surpassed my expectations. Caledon recaptures the vibes of Blackwell Academy, but with a more mature coat of paint, and the characters, like Safi, Moses, and Gwen, are 3-dimensional and engaging. And best of all, they nailed Max's personality, right down to her awkward internal monologuing. From a gameplay perspective, shifting between the 2 timelines and passing items and knowledge from the dead world to the living world is fun, and most of the major choices feel dramatic and impactful. As someone who didn't enjoy Before the Storm, and found True Colors to be solid but nothing to write home about, I have to give Deck 9 some serious credit for what they've accomplished here. Most importantly, they did exactly what I wanted them to do with the early access content, which is end the game's 2nd chapter on a big cliffhanger that would keep us talking until the release of the full game. So without further ado, let's take some time to talk about that ending, examine its implications, and consider what lies ahead for Max Caulfield. Obviously, from here on out, this video will be full of spoilers, so if you haven't played the game yet, and don't want to know anything about it, turn back now. At the end of Double Exposure Chapter 2, Moses calls Max, desperate for help. Detective Alderman, who's trying to solve Safi's murder, has Moses in his sights as the case's chief suspect. Moses himself does have a secret. Determined not to let Safi's camera become a piece of evidence, he stole it from the crime scene and has it hidden away in his now locked up office. Using her timeline shifting powers and the ability to move objects between timelines, which is something she discovers during this sequence, Max finds the camera and brings it back home so they can develop the photos. Max and Moses expect this to be a nice way to remember their friend. They think that the final photo Safi took was the selfie with the 2 of them up on the roof. But as it turns out, Safi took one more photo before she died, of Max standing in front of her with a gun and tears in her eyes. As you'd expect, Moses freaks out and gets out of there as quickly as he can, leaving Max to wonder what the hell is going on here. So that is the big twist of Life is Strange Double Exposure, that Max killed Safi. She is behind the murder she's been investigating all along. It's a shocking moment, but I have to be honest when I say that I sort of saw it coming. Throughout the game, you can discover mysterious Polaroids left behind by an unknown photographer. The only person we know who takes Polaroids is Max, which made me suspect her right from the beginning. And if you find enough of them, she'll even notice that it's her handwriting at the bottom of the Polaroids. So seeing Max with a gun aimed at Safi wasn't so much of a surprise as it was confirmation, at least for me. Overall, I'd call it a strong twist with a good setup. It's still surprising, but the Polaroids do give it a more natural feel. I have concerns about whether or not Deck 9 is going to be able to stick the landing, and it's a pretty complicated development in a number of ways, but I am very excited to see where they go with this. And where exactly do I think they're going with this? Well, I see 2 possibilities. The simplest explanation is that Max is going to end up using her original powers again, the one she had back in the first Life is Strange. In Double Exposure, she can shift between timelines, but when she was at Blackwell Academy, she could rewind time and use photographs to travel years back into the past. We were with Max when Safi was shot, so in order for her to also be the murderer, some time-traveling shenanigans have to be going on. The kinds of time-traveling shenanigans Max got into with Chloe during her time in Arcadia Bay. So if you ask me, that's the most likely possibility. This is supported by the aforementioned Polaroids, as well as the fact that Max is crying in the photo. But why would she do this in the first place? Why would Max kill Safi? She's crying, so she's obviously emotional about it. It's clearly something she doesn't want to do, but feels compelled to for some reason. Well, something that stands out to me is just how better off everyone, other than Safi and her mother, seem to be in the Dead World timeline. Gwen is worried about the police, but she still has her job, and Lucas has a positive relationship with his son. Somehow, Safi being alive changes all of this, and in future chapters, I've got a feeling that we're going to see the lives of more characters upended in the timeline where she's still around. This is supported by the air of mystery around Safi. In Chapter 2, after discovering that she had a relationship with Vin, Max begins to wonder if she ever really knew Safi at all. It's possible that there's more to her character than we yet know, and that her continued existence, much like Chloe in the first game, spells doom for everyone around her. Either because that's just her role in the timeline, or perhaps because she has some dark secrets of her own. And thus, in the final chapter, Max might once again be faced with choosing between the life of a dear friend and the lives of many other people. It would be both a nice callback to the first game and a grim yet interesting twist on its themes, as it would force Max to, directly, sacrifice a friend to save the lives of others. Whereas last time around, if you traded Chloe for Arcadia Bay, she did this indirectly. If the theme of the original game was how far would you go to save the life of your best friend at the expense of everyone else, then the theme of Double Exposure might be how far would you go to save the lives of everyone at the expense of your best friend. After everything she went through in Arcadia Bay, that seems like a natural question to ask an older, more mature Max Caulfield. But that's just one possibility. The other is a lot more complicated. In both the living and dead worlds, characters make reference to doppelgangers causing trouble around Caledon. In the living world, it's Gwen, who claims that someone who isn't her, but looks just like her, was caught trafficking drugs on campus. In the dead world, it's Reggie, who says he saw someone who looked just like him, but wasn't him, up at the observatory. We're on the fourth main title Life is Strange game, fifth if you count Before the Storm, and we've yet to see a game featuring more than one character with superpowers. Is it possible that there's a shapeshifter running around campus? If so, it would explain what both Reggie and Gwen saw, and potentially why the last photo Safi took was of Max aiming a gun at her. Because it's not Max at all, but rather a shapeshifter who's pretending to be Max. Honestly, if this is true, then it puts everything we've done so far in the game into question. Who knows if we've been talking to the real versions of these characters, or if we're being manipulated by the shapeshifter? Personally, I think my first theory is the more likely scenario from a narrative perspective. It's just more natural, and would allow the developers to dive back into the brilliant time-traveling storytelling that we saw in the first game. But from a gameplay perspective, I think the second might be closer to the route they'll end up taking. It feels weird suggesting that there's a shapeshifter in a Life is Strange game, but I don't see any other explanation to what happened to Reggie and Gwen. Plus, Life is Strange characters tend to have, for lack of a better term, X-Men powers, and shapeshifting is definitely what I'd call an X-Men type power. Also, it would allow the developers to stay fully committed to the timeline gameplay loop they've created, which is pretty cool, rather than turning back the clocks to the familiar, which is something I'd imagine they'd want to do. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with either of these theories, or do you have a suspicion of your own? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching. Big shout out to all my Silver and Gold tier YouTube channel members and Patreon subscribers, including James Pruitt, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, Pathonian, Faith G, and Anna Novakova, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time.